The People's Pharmacy podcast is supported in part by CocoVia. CocoVia cocoflavanols support both cardiovascular health and cognitive function by promoting healthy blood flow, transporting oxygen and nutrients to vital organs and muscles, including your heart and brain.
CocoVia now comes in an even more concentrated formula with 450 milligrams of cocoflavanols, 5 times more than the leading dark chocolate bar and 15 times more than the leading cocoa powder.
CocoVia has a proprietary process that preserves cocoflavanols at the highest levels, and the product undergoes rigorous testing at every stage, which allows them to guarantee the highest level of cocoflavanols per serving and to provide the purest, highest quality product possible.
People's Pharmacy listeners can now try CocoVia for 25% off by using the code Peoples25 at cocavia.com. That's COCOAVIA.com. What's for dinner? Whether you're cooking or eating, that's a common question. Why is it so important for our health? This is the People's Pharmacy with Terry and Joe Graydon.
Our food choices have a profound impact on our well-being. Starting the day with a Danish and a cup of coffee, grabbing a burger at lunch, and ordering pizza for supper is easy, but far from optimal. Can you find time in your busy schedule to cook real food? What does that even mean?
Dr. Hyman is director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. He'll tell you why cooking matters. We'll also talk with an eating disorder specialist about getting kids to eat well.
Coming up on the People's Pharmacy, food. What the heck should I cook? Welcome to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Terry Graydon.
And I'm Joe Graydon. Do you ever find yourself wondering what to make for supper? When you have errands to run and time is tight, you don't always want to reach for a frozen dinner or order pizza. What tastes good and doesn't take too long to prepare?
Dr. Mark Hyman has answers to this perennial problem. Is it possible to cook food that is nutritious, delicious, and not too complicated? Can it be done in a reasonable amount of time without breaking the budget?
To help us answer these questions, we turn to Dr. Mark Hyman. He's director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, president of clinical affairs on the board of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and founder and director of the Ultra Wellness Center. He's the New York Times best-selling author, and his most recent book is Food. What the heck should I cook?
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Mark Hyman.
I'm so glad to be back with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hyman, you're a man on a mission, as it's been described, and it's all about food. Why is food center stage in just about everything that you do?
Well, it turns out that food in our food system is both the cause of so many of things that trouble the world today, and also the solution. It's driving most chronic illness, which now affects 1 in 2 people. That chronic illness burden is going to cost us $95 trillion over the next 35 years. That's over $3 trillion a year, which imagine what that could pay for if we fix that in terms of free education, free healthcare, who knows what. It is driving climate change. It's driving environmental degradation. It's causing social injustice, poverty, mental illness, violence. These are all things that are connected by food. And the things that are driving most of these problems is our ultra-processed food system, which comprises 60% of our diet. In order to really shift these problems, we need to reimagine a food system, and we need to reimagine our own kitchens and our own diet. And that's really what the focus of my work has been. As a functional medicine doctor, I'm always wondering what's the cause and how is everything connected and what's upstream. And as I began to really work with this question, I realized that so many of my patients' problems were driven by their diet. And by fixing that, they could get better. But then I realized, well, where's their diet coming from? Well, their diet's coming from the food system. And where's the food system coming from? It's coming from our policies and from the influence of big food and big ag on all these policies in our government around the world. So I think this is really, what's lighting a fire under me now, because I see these tsunami of problems coming, and I feel like I'm on the beach and everybody's just sunbathing, waiting, for a suntan while they're about to get engulfed in a tsunami.
Dr. Hyman, you mentioned functional medicine. Can you tell us what is functional medicine and how did you come to it?
Well, functional medicine is essentially a new way of thinking about disease and health. It's the science of creating health rather than just diagnosing and treating symptoms. It's looking at causes, and it's looking at how do we create health and balance in the body rather than just suppressing symptoms. And I got into it because I got very sick from mercury poisoning. I developed chronic fatigue syndrome, gut issues, cognitive impairment, a whole host of immune issues. And I had to literally reverse engineer my way back to health by understanding the body in a way that I didn't learn in medical school, which is as a system where everything's connected. And the microbiome is a great example of how it's blowing apart our conventional notions of disease. The microbiome is linked to diabetes and cancer and heart disease and autism and Alzheimer's and autoimmune diseases and allergies and asthma. I mean, you name it, the microbiome has a role. And so how does that even make sense given our current conceptions of disease? You don't go to the asthma doc, he's not asking you about your gut, or the rheumatologist is not asking you about your gut, but that may be where the answers are. So I think we need to sort of reframe medicine completely by looking at this new emerging paradigm of systems thinking and systems biology when it comes to medicine. Some people call it network medicine, systems medicine, functional medicine. It doesn't matter. It's the same emerging paradigm shift that's affecting all of healthcare.
Dr. Hyman, you say your journey to finding functional medicine started with mercury poisoning. Tell us about that.
Well, it's so funny. It's one of those areas, it's like a black hole in medicine. Toxins and their effect on health are almost completely ignored by conventional medicine unless you have an acute toxicity. And I lived in China. I have very poor detoxification genetics, and I accumulated a lot of mercury because of the pollution and cleaning out my air filter. And that just disrupted every system in my body. And I began to learn that my immune system was disrupted, my gut was disrupted, my hormones were disrupted, my mitochondria and energy system was disrupted. Everything wasn't working. And by understanding these various systems, I was able to sort of have a very different view of the cause of health and the cause of disease. And by literally using the principles of functional medicine to remove the bad stuff and put in the good stuff and create balance in these imbalanced systems, I was able to get back to vibrant health.
We were fascinated to read Howard Stern's book in which he describes mercury poisoning from fish. He was eating primarily, as you say, sushi and fish, and I don't think people normally consider mercury poisoning as a result of their diet.
No, most people don't. I think it's increasingly becoming a topic where people are aware, but the level of pollution in the oceans and the level of mercury in many large fish and in sushi is just staggering. And it's one of the huge unidentified causes of many chronic illnesses, whether it's autoimmune disease or cardiac diseases or metabolic diseases. And the literature is there to support it. It's just sort of like ignored. Doctors don't have a bucket to put it in or know what to do with it or how to treat people with it. So that's really the role of functional medicine, is to help people understand how these toxins play a role, not just mercury, but many others, and then actually learn how to detoxify, to upregulate your body's own systems for detoxification, and use various methods to help remove these from the system. And over the last 30 years of doing this, I probably, run 10 to 20,000 tests of people with heavy metal toxicity and treated them. And the results are really staggering in terms of the improvement in these patients, whether it's cognitive function, insomnia, depression, anxiety, autoimmune disease, sometimes weight, metabolic issues. It's very powerful.
Now, I have a confession to make, Dr. Hyman. You and I are very similar.
I'm not a priest.
It's okay. It has everything to do with our diet and how we grew up. Because you talk about your mother and how she cooked food, and very similar to my mom. I mean, we had a garden in our backyard in eastern Pennsylvania. My mom would go to the farmer's market every week religiously, and she went to the food co-op. And so the idea of going to the A&P, every once in a while, but there was very little prepared food in our house, prepared in the sense of in a can, some kind of fast food. What was that?
Or a box. It's just as well. She when she opened boxes, it looked like a bear had attacked them.
But the bottom line is that we had fresh food at virtually every meal, and almost always a salad and vegetables. That's a lot like what you went through as a child.
Yeah, my mom grew up in Brooklyn in the 30s, and there really wasn't a lot of processed food back then. My grandmother used to pluck chickens for a nickel a piece to go get money for the movies. And, my great-grandmother used to make gefilte fish from wild carp that they would buy in the markets and keep in the bathtub fresh until it was time to make the gefilte fish. And then my mother went to Europe, and she lived in Europe for 11 years during the era of processed food development and introduction in the United States. But she shopped at farmers markets. They wouldn't even call them that. They were just the markets. There was no packaging. There was no plastic. There was just the food. It was meat. There was vegetables. And she cooked incredibly delicious food. And we moved to Toronto years later, and it was in the suburbs, and we had literally had a whole bunch of fruit trees in our backyard. We had a whole garden. We'd go out and pick the fruits and vegetables, and it was just sort of part of our life. And yes, there was, it was the 70s, and there was Tang, and there was Fleischmann's margarine, and there was all this stuff, macaroni and cheese. But for the most part, we ate really fresh, whole food, and that was my grandmother's motto. She was deaf. She couldn't hear, but she was very smart and also spoke very simply. She said, just buy fresh, eat fresh, which I think is a really great piece of advice.
And then along came Betty Crocker.
Oh, yes, Betty Crocker.
Who wasn't even a real person.
Yeah. Yeah, well, my mother had the Betty Crocker cookbook.
And so did mine, I have to admit
women
that. Yes.
In the 60s and 70s, but she was an invention of the food industry. General Mills convened all the big food companies in the, I think, late 50s, and were very threatened by another Betty, who was a home ec teacher who was trying to get people to cook real food and to teach women how to cook and take care of their homes. And there were federal extension workers that went around the country and taught women to have gardens and how to raise families and how to prepare meals. And it was very threatening to the food industry. So they created this whole concept of convenience as a value in food. And that's where we get "You Deserve a Break Today" and all these messages that it's too hard to cook, the TV dinners. And it sort of usurped the American kitchen in a way that was really intentional. And Betty Crocker was sort of the beginning of that, because it essentially led to people putting in processed foods in their home cooking recipes. Like, put in 1 can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup in your casserole, or sprinkle a roll of Ritz crackers on your broccoli with Velveeta cheese on top. And so it really insinuated all these processed foods into, quote, home cooking. And eventually it sort of usurped home cooking completely, where now we've raised 2 generations of Americans who don't know how to cook and who watch more cooking shows on television than actually cook.
You're listening to Dr. Mark Hyman. He's the director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, president of clinical affairs on the board of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and founder and director of the Ultra Wellness Center. His most recent book is Food, What the Heck Should I Cook?
I remember that Betty Crocker cookbook. My mother relied on it quite frequently. It was well used. And yes, she did buy that cream of mushroom soup, and she used it in her baked chicken recipe. It was delicious.
There were several Betty Crocker cookbooks. I had one that was designed for young cooks.
After the break, what's the food philosophy that led Dr. Hyman to create a cookbook with recipes that are gluten-free and mostly dairy-free and vegan?
Hear how some people have addressed their health problems with Dr. Hyman's Pegan diet approach.
Pegan, that's P-E-G-A-N. Sometimes changes come faster than you might expect, even for people with diabetes or arthritis.
Is there one diet that's right for everyone?
How can you get kids involved in the kitchen and at the table so that they will learn to love healthy eating?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy podcast is brought to you in part by Mighty Muscadine Grapeberry, king of the superfruits. 100% natural, plant-based supplements, juice, snacks, and more. The muscadine grape is a berry, providing greater health benefits than blueberries, cranberries, and the whole berry family. with oxidative damage-fighting antioxidants to support cardiovascular, immune system, and joint health.
At Mighty Muscadine, full-time chemists and food scientists check all their products for quality and purity. Find out more online at mightymuscadine.com. And right now, when you order online, you'll save 20% on all Mighty Muscadine grape products by entering the code MIGHTY20. That's MIGHTY 20. The People's Pharmacy podcast is sponsored in part by Kaya Biotics. KAYA Biotics offers the first probiotics which are both certified organic and hypoallergenic.
All probiotics are produced in Germany under laboratory conditions with high-quality ingredients and under strict regulatory oversight.
The 3 available formulas are created for very specific purposes, such as strengthening the immune system, fighting yeast infections, and helping with weight loss.
To learn more about Kaya Biotics probiotics and the important topic of gut health, you can visit their website, KayaBiotics.com. That's KAYA Biotics.com. Use the discount code PEOPLE for $10 off your first purchase.
Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon.
The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Mighty Muscadine grape seed and skin products, natural supplements, juice, and snacks containing antioxidants that research indicates may support cardiovascular, immune system, and joint health. Information online at mightymuscadine.com.
And by Cocoa Via, the maker of high-potency cocoa-flavanol supplements that support cognitive and cardiovascular health. More information at cocovia.com.
Also by Verazana, an analytical laboratory providing home health tests for hormones, gut health, and the microbiome. Online at verisana.com.
Today we're talking about food. How can you make it healthy and tasty at the same time? In fact, what the heck should you be cooking?
Our guest is Dr. Mark Hyman. He is the director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, president of clinical affairs on the board of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and founder and director of the Ultra Wellness Center. His most recent book is Food. What the heck should I cook?
Dr. Hyman, you have a new book, a cookbook. It's beautiful, and it's called Food. What the heck should I cook? And of course, as you pointed out, for some people, the question is also, how the heck should I cook? Because maybe their mothers and grandmothers didn't teach them how to cook. So tell us a little bit about the ideas behind this book, the food philosophy you talk about.
Well, there's a couple of things. One is, it's really clear to me that we have to take back our kitchens, that they've been hijacked from us, and that is a big problem in our society where over half of meals are eaten out of the home. And then we've been all taught that cooking is difficult, that it's time-consuming, that it's expensive, that it's just not easy. And none of that is true. Those are all propaganda messages from the food industry. And you know, my wife says I should get a prize for being, you know, the best cook in terms of time per deliciousness. So I'm very good at cooking yummy food in a very short time because I don't have a lot of time. So it's very possible to do that. So I want people to understand the importance of that too. I want people to actually have the tools and the skills to learn how to cook, not just from recipes, but how to cook without recipes. And I talk a lot about that in the book. How do you begin to learn how to put food together and the basic skills of cooking? I mean, if you have a body, you need to know how to maintain it. And one of those things is learning how to cook. So it shouldn't be that intimidating. And then I created a set of recipes that's based on a certain set of principles that come out of the scientific literature and my studying nutrition for 40 years about what creates a healthy human. So it's obviously no processed food, but it's also including ingredients that actually help us thrive. It's including a lot of phytochemicals and nutrients in colorful plant foods. It's including a lot of rich good fats, the omega-3 fats, olive oil, avocados, and it includes nuts and seeds. And the recipes are just phenomenal. And you don't know you're eating healthy. You don't know you're having, specifically medicine as food. You're just enjoying the meals. But as a side effect, you're activating all these healing responses in your body that reduce inflammation, that balance your hormones, that help regulate your microbiome, and actually give you the opportunity to feel really good. So not only will it will taste good, but you're going to feel good and you're going to enjoy it. And so it's based on a kind of a set of principles that are not too extreme. I think many diets are very extreme. We've got paleo, we've got keto, we've got vegan, and it's just people get overwhelmed. And it's often not sustainable. So I was once sitting on a panel with a couple of friends of mine. One was a paleo doc, one was a vegan cardiologist. They were fighting, and I was in the middle. And I'm like, hey, if you're paleo and you're vegan, I must be pegan. And it was just a joke. It was just a play on words. But then I realized that there are certain common principles that they all agree on. In fact, everything is the same with both of those, except one would suggest you get your protein from beans and grains, and the other from animal protein, and everything else is basically the same. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. And so I basically sort of looked at what are those common themes and what are the principles of science and nutrition that we can all agree on. One, we should be eating a diet that's low in starch and sugar. We call it a low glycemic diet because those are the things that drive heart disease, cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's. Two, we should be eating a diet that's really plant-rich, not necessarily plant-based, but plant-rich, meaning the majority of our food should be coming from fruits and vegetables, and nuts and seeds, and lots of colorful plant foods because those are where all the good stuff is that helps us stay healthy and heal disease. And of course, we want to eat, grains and beans, but the right kinds. And gluten grains in this country are really a problem. I think the way we raise wheat is an issue. This hybridization, the glyphosate, the calcium propionate as a preservative, the amount of starch in it because of how it's bred, all lead to basically wheat in this country being worse than sugar for your blood sugar and having all sorts of other consequences. So more non-gluten grains or weird grains, I say, like black rice, brown rice, quinoa. Beans are also great. Stay away from the big starchy ones. And, obviously nobody should be eating 3 to 5 pounds of food additives a year, which Americans do unconsciously, whether it's BHT or butylated hydroxytoluene or carrageenan, which causes leaky gut, or even worse, things like glyphosate, which is in so many of our foods, and particularly the grains. And of course, who wants antibiotics, hormones, and pesticides in their food? Nobody. I mean, it's not like an aspirational thing. I want more pesticides in my food. I think we should be trying to reduce or eliminate those. So these are just simple principles. We call them Pegan principles, but it's a way of understanding how to eat that's inclusive, that's delicious, that includes whole foods, and that actually uses the science of food as medicine to create health for so many people. And it's just a side effect of eating this food. You will actually help reverse diabetes and help with autoimmune disease and help reduce inflammation and cognitive function and mood and so many different things. And it's just sort of automatic. You don't have to think about it.
Well, one of the things I noticed as we went through as I flipped through the recipes is that they're gluten-free. All of the recipes are gluten-free, and most of them, or a lot of them anyway, are dairy-free. Why those choices?
Well, as I said, wheat in this country is problematic. One, we've hybridized it, so it's dwarf wheat, so it has a number of properties that are problematic. One is a super starch. It's called amylopectin A that acts worse than sugar in terms of your blood sugar. Two, when you breed plants, you add genes together, and there's way more inflammatory gliadin proteins that have led to a 400% increase in celiac disease and a dramatic increase in non-celiac gluten sensitivity, which probably affects 1 out of 5 people. And if you have any issue with your health, it's an easy thing to do to stop and see what happens. Not to say forever, but to see what happens. And then I think the dairy in this country is not the dairy we used to eat. Well, first of all, the government tells us to drink 3 cups of milk a day as adults and 2 cups as kids. There's no scientific evidence that supports that. In fact, the got milk ads were basically banned by the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, even though the USDA were funding those ads because there was no scientific proof that they reduced fractures or did all the things that they said it did. And so it's not a health food. It's not a health food. But the hybridization of the cows, the homogenization, not of the milk, but of the actual cows, the Holsteins, they're they're bred in a way that has the milk has a very high level of something called A1 casein, which is very inflammatory, causes lots of gut issues, can be linked to autoimmune diseases, allergies, eczema, and acne, and many, many other things. So I'm not a big fan of that, as well as, just general factory farming of animals is horrific for them, for us, for the planet. So those are all reasons. Sheep and goat milk are A2 casein, which is more well tolerated, and there are cows that are more heirloom cows that are A2 casein, and that they may be better tolerated. So, for example, there's a lost breed of Spanish cows that was found in Mexico up in the mountains, and they brought them to Colorado, and they're trying to raise them, and they're a very different type of meat, very different type of dairy that comes from these cows. So I think those are the kinds of things I worry about. But as a doctor who sees patients with chronic illness, the dairy and gluten are the two biggest drivers of inflammation and gut issues and all sorts of other problems. So that's why I sort of try to reduce those.
Dr. Hyman, our listeners, and quite candidly, your colleagues, often learn best from case reports. I wonder if you can describe maybe one or two of your patients and how they have benefited from your PEGAN, P-E-G-A-N, approach and food. What the heck should I cook? So give us a sense of what actually happens to real people when they change what they eat.
Of course. Well, a couple of recent patients come to mind. One was Janice, who is quite a lady, but she was very sick. She was 65. She had heart failure, diabetes. Her body mass index was 43. Normal is less than 25. So that's what we call severely obese. She also had high blood pressure. She had early kidney failure, fatty liver, was on a pile of medications and insulin. And all we did was put her in a group, one of our groups at Cleveland Clinic in the Center for Functional Medicine called Functioning for Life, which is basically a support group that's led by our medical providers, nutritionists, health coaches. It's super effective in helping people change their lifestyle. And she just changed her diet. She'd grown up on eating processed food and was a very educated woman, but just never learned about food from her family. And within 3 days, she was off her insulin. Within 3 months, she was off all her medications and dramatically improved. She lost about 43 pounds. Within a year, she lost 116 pounds and reversed her heart failure, her diabetes, her kidney problems, liver problems, got off her blood pressure meds, and basically saved about $15,000 to $20,000 in co-pays for her medication, just for the co-pays. So that's a profound effect in a very short time, and it works better. Food works better than any drug in most cases in terms of these issues. The other case I just remember was
Dr. Hyman, did I hear you correctly? Did you actually say that within 3 days?
Yeah, 3 days.
Changing her diet, she was able to go without insulin?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we see this all the time in medicine, right? And when you do bariatric surgery, when someone's severely obese, it can be 400 pounds, you do a gastric bypass, and 3 days later, their blood sugar is normal. It's not because they're skinny and they lost the weight. It's because they changed what they were eating, right? They changed what they were eating. There have been studies in diabetics where in 7 days you can normalize blood sugar through intensive diet interventions, where in 3 months you can reverse the damage to the pancreas and the liver that happens with diabetes. So we know this from the medical literature. It's not a surprise.
I do want to point out that we're talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes,
right.
Of course. Not type 1.
Most people think when they hear insulin, they think type 1 diabetes. But this was somebody who was having so much trouble controlling her blood sugar with type 2 diabetes, she also needed insulin.
Thank you. That was a great correction. Yeah, no, type 1 diabetes, you can't cure it with diet.
Right. Now,
it's
tell
an
us
autoimmune
about
disease.
your other patient.
Well, this other patient came in. She had rheumatoid arthritis. She had constant joint pain, was tired all the time. She had a lot of gut issues. And we simply changed her diet, gave her a few nutritional supplements to support her health. I saw her back after a couple of months just yesterday. And she's like, I'm completely pain-free. I have no joint pain. And, she was seen by rheumatologists, was going to be she was on steroids and heavy drugs, and she was going to be on a drug that cost $50,000 a year. And we were able to avoid that simply by helping her change her diet. And we just see case after case of the power of food as medicine. And it's not just a calorie carrier. It's actually information. It's literally like instructions, a code that can upgrade or downgrade your biological software with every bite. And it doesn't work in months or years. It literally works in minutes to change your hormones, your brain chemistry, your protein functions, your microbiome and your immune system really quickly. And that's why it works so fast.
There are people who get very emotional about particular diets. And so whether it's a vegan diet, a paleo diet, a high carb, a low carb, a low fat, a high fat, keto, I mean, how do we make sense of this? And are there some people who do really great on, high carbs and other people who do really well on keto? Or is it just luck of the draw?
Well, ideology really should have no place in nutrition science, but unfortunately it does. And it is one of the most controversial and antagonistic, divisive subjects out there. And that's unfortunate because, we do have a lot of science. We do know a lot about what constitutes a healthy diet. And yes, there are different people who respond better to different diets. There are patients of mine who I put on a keto diet who struggled with really high cholesterol, high triglycerides, who couldn't lose weight, and boom, their cholesterol drops 100 points, their triglycerides drops 200 points, their HDL goes up, the good cholesterol, they lose 20 pounds, and they feel great. Other people, not so much. And I think it can raise their cholesterol and it can cause other problems. So I think we have to look at what is the right approach for each individual. And that's really why the Pegan diet is so great, because it's not, we don't need another diet. It was kind of a joke, but the principles are applicable across a wide range of cultures, a wide range of taste preferences, and a wide range of needs. Some people can tolerate more carbohydrates. Some people are very carbohydrate intolerant. Some people need more fat. Some people need less fat. And I think it's really about finding what's right for you. And I always joke and I say the best doctor in the room is your own body. If you listen to it, it'll tell you what works and what doesn't.
So you're saying there's not a single diet that's right for everybody?
No, I think there are nutritional principles within which a wide variety of diets are possible, but there is not one right diet for everybody. But there are dietary principles that are applicable for everybody. We should all be avoiding processed food. We shouldn't be eating a pound of sugar and flour a day per person. We shouldn't be consuming massive amounts of chemicals and additives in processed food in our diet. We should be eating more good fats, not necessarily keto, but more good fats. We should be eating a low-starch diet. We should be having lots of vegetables. I mean, these are principles that any scientist and nutritionist would agree with.
Dr. Hyman, when should children start participating in the family meal planning? I know that for some families, little kids actually drive some food decisions, but in the wrong direction. So when do we encourage kids to start with healthy eating?
Well, I always joke, there's two things on the menu at my house when my kids were growing up. Take it or leave it. And there was no menu. There was no kids menu. There was no kids food. They just ate what we ate. And I think that's the case in 99% of the rest of the world in traditional cultures. In Japan, little kids eat raw fish and seaweed. Okay? They don't eat Lunchables and Go-Gurts and weird, Happy Meals, right? We have to get our kids eating real food right from the get-go. If you start hooking your kid on processed food and sugar, good luck getting them off, because they are going to become addicted. They're going to crave it. They're going to have temper tantrums and fits if they don't get it. And I think in the home, my home was a safe zone. There was nothing that could get anybody in trouble. When my kids got to be teenagers, they had more freedom, they had a little more money, and they were able to sort of make bad choices. But both of them have come back to really healthy eating because they had that foundation as a kid. They knew what to do. And I think it's really important that you model it and that your kids learn from you and that you bring them in the kitchen. My kids, I have videos of my kids cooking when my son was 13 months old or 18 months old with my daughter. I mean, they made a mess, but they had a lot of fun, and we had kids cookbooks. We made fun meals and it was all real fresh food. We had a garden. They helped me plant the garden, pick the vegetables. My daughter thought the eggplant was like an egg, and so she went and got it when it was really not fully grown yet. So it was fun, and I think that even if you can just have grow a little herbs in the pot, or have a little pot on your deck that grows tomatoes or whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a lot. But teaching your kids in your home about food is so important, because if you don't do that, you're going to set them up for a lifetime of not knowing how to take care of their own food needs, and not knowing what real food is, and not understanding the deliciousness of real food.
Dr. Mark Hyman, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Dr. Mark Hyman, director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine. His most recent book is Food. What the Heck Should I Cook?
After the break, we'll talk with Dr. Nancy Zucker, an expert on child psychology and eating disorders.
She consulted for Dr. Yum on how to teach children to enjoy eating a range of foods.
What do parents do that isn't helpful, and how can they correct that?
You're listening to The People's Pharmacy with Joe and Terry Graydon.
This People's Pharmacy podcast is brought to you in part by Verisana.com.
Verisana Lab offers home health tests that allow you to monitor your hormones and health conditions. You can take control of the quantitative assessment of your health and learn about male and female hormone balance, the stress hormone cortisol, leaky gut, gluten intolerance, or your gut microbiome.
Take a more active role in tracking your health and take 20% off your first order of a mail-in testing opportunity with the discount code PEOPLE. That's uppercase PEOPLE. To learn more, go to Verisana.com. That's Verisana.com. Welcome back to the People's Pharmacy. I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by CocoVia, offering plant-based nutrients in the form of cocoflavanols for brain and heart health. Online at cocovia.com.
And by Kaya Biotics, probiotic products made in Germany from certified organic ingredients. KAYA Biotics.com.
Also by Mighty Muscadine grapeseed and skin products, natural supplements, juice, and snacks containing antioxidants that research indicates may support cardiovascular, immune system, and joint health. Information online, mightymuscadine.com.
We're talking today about healthy food on the family dinner table. What can parents do to encourage their kids to eat a range of healthy foods?
Our guest is Dr. Nancy Zucker, Associate Professor in Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and Associate Director of Graduate Studies at Duke University. She's a child and family clinical psychologist and an eating disorders specialist.
Welcome to the People's Pharmacy, Dr. Nancy Zucker.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Zucker, last year we had the chance to talk with Dr. Nimali Fernando, Dr. Yum, about her work to help children learn to enjoy a variety of healthful foods. I understand that your research has been a collaboration with Dr. Yum, and we would love to know what you have done.
You know, it's interesting. I met Nimali on NPR. Actually, we did a talk show together about picky eating, and I first learned about what she was trying to do, which was to work within preschools, to have cooking classes, to teach kids to, interact with healthy food so that it was fun, that they got to eat together. And I was very excited about what she was doing because I feel like so much of the emphasis on healthy eating doesn't emphasize the fun part. We don't emphasize the joy in eating. And so, basically it was me just offering to consult with her so that she could do a better job of collecting data so that she could then therefore go to different organizations so that her program would have better uptake.
Now, a lot of our listeners may not remember what Dr. Yum was trying to accomplish. So if you could summarize for our listeners what her passions were, what you found particularly engaging about what she was trying to do, and then what you did, what kind of research you actually performed.
Sure. So Dr. Yum created a curriculum where she trains preschool teachers to deliver it, right? So it's very disseminable, and it's cooking classes, right? So there's teaching about healthy food and using child-friendly utensils, and the children, they're child-tested recipes, so they're bright and colorful and tasty, and all the kids prepare the foods together and cook them together and then hopefully eat them together.
And presumably foods that children have prepared, they're more interested in eating.
And then that's why, so my interest in it, so I study the extreme ends of the eating spectrum. I study individuals who avoid foods, right? They're kind of picky eaters to an extreme, right? Children who are so picky that it's interfering with their health and growth. So my initial interest in Namali's work was, would something like this work for the extreme cases, or is this a good classroom intervention just, to help the majority of kids? And so part of my initial interest in partnering with her is answering that question. And I would say that the jury's still out on that, although the teachers' responses. So what we did was we asked the teachers kind of prior to the starting of the curriculum and afterwards, whether they felt the children were more willing to try new foods, to be more food adventurous, and they did.
Well, a lot of parents worry about children's eating behavior.
Absolutely.
And you deal, as you have pointed out, with the extremes. But even quote-unquote normal children, whatever we mean by that, can go through phases. I'm just eating Cheerios. I'm not interested in anything else. Or just pizza. Forget the other stuff. And, green, yuck. So just out of curiosity, in your research, how do you interact with parents and with children who, for a while, go through a picky eater's phase?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? Usually when it's a child whose eating is sticking around, where you have to start is actually from the beginning, right? There's usually a long history of of early childhood feeding issues, of mom stresses around feeding, like trouble with breastfeeding, her own emotional stresses that kind of carries into the feeding environment. And so usually when you're taking a look at a system that seems to be stuck, you really have to appreciate the narrative that got them there, as opposed to starting with introducing new foods right away. If you start with that, it's doomed to fail if you don't really know how they got there.
Now, it seems to me that the food industry undermines a lot of healthy eating options because they've come up with very creative packaging, very tasty foods.
Didn't we see an ad for the Avengers movie for a tie-in with a fast food restaurant for kids?
Right. Yeah, it's a pretty hard battle. A colleague of mine at Penn State, Kathleen Keller, she did a study where she just did that. She packaged cut up vegetables with, a Disney character or not, right? And just looked at whether the kids were more receptive to the vegetables if they had a character. And of course they were, right? So these marketers know what they're doing.
Now, tell us a little bit about preschoolers and your research, because I think a lot of people think, well, yeah, maybe when a child is 7 or 8 years of age, they could, help me make chocolate chip cookies. There we go.
Kids usually do like to help make cookies.
They do.
Usually.
But what about preschoolers and what about other kinds of foods?
Preschoolers get frustrated because they want to be doing more than they can, right? So any opportunity that you give preschoolers to feel a sense of mastery, that they're doing something that an adult can do, that in and of itself has value. And you don't even have to get into that this is a healthy food or a non-healthy food. In fact, I wish we would do less of that and just focus on, like you were saying, children as food critics, food as the taste of the food, making something that's delicious, and feeling that they have the power to make those kind of judgments, I think goes a long way. And if you're cooking with healthy foods and you're making recipes that are fresh, it's going to be tasty. And so you're kind of getting the health at the back end rather than teaching them, oh, you should eat this because it's healthy.
And it's not just taste. Sometimes it's texture.
That's right. Absolutely. Right.
Well, I think a lot of times parents bring their own beliefs with them. And so if a parent thinks, oh, that food is yucky, then the children will think it's yucky too.
Yeah. The role of parent modeling is tricky, right? Because even studies that look at infants and young toddlers where they've kind of give the toddler like two choices and they have a adult kind of frowning at one or smiling at the other, the child will then, go towards the food that's being smiled at, right? So the children, because they're dependent on adults to judge the safety and acceptability of foods, are looking even more than adults are to cues, right, that a food is acceptable. So it's hard on a parent, right, if they have a natural distaste of things, to fake it, right? And so when I was talking about having to kind of go back and learn a family's history with food, oftentimes it's getting to the origins of parent dislikes to help them navigate their own memories with being forced to finish a plate of food that they found disgusting and kind of work through their own stuff so that they can present the best foot to their child.
Dr. Zucker, we understand that you do deal with people, children, some adults, I think, too, but let's focus on children who actually have really serious eating problems. Can you tell us about a treatment, perhaps about a child who was able to overcome such a problem, and how did you help them?
Yeah, I love working with these children. The way I explain it to both the children and their parents is they've got sensory superpowers, right? We mentioned before about kind of sensitivity to taste and textures, and my experience with these kids is they have a sixth sense that they seem to be able to to spot the brown spot on the French fry and to taste differences in whether one potato chip is more crunchy than the next. And what I've learned over the years is that this sensitivity is not only to food, but also to experiences inside their body. So they're very sensitive to feelings of fullness and just kind of how the foods make them feel, how the foods feel in their mouth. And
that could be useful.
It could be very useful. And you can imagine where, like, once upon a time, it was very useful if they had to, detect poisons for the king or, and do all these were, you're hypervigilant, detailed.
That's who you'd want to hire.
Absolutely. TSA agent. I mean, these kids, and also, when they say that a French fry is the best type of fry, these kids have really good taste. I think that there's a job for them as a food tasting panel. They know the best chicken nugget, the best French fry. But so, my intervention, because there's usually, and I was very interested in these child's early experiences of pain, early GERD, right, acid reflux when they were infant, and just kind of these early learning experiences where you don't really think about kind of the impact of these memories, right? You can imagine if you ate and every time it was painful, right, that's kind of a classical conditioning, Pavlov's dog kind of situation that eating is bad and threatening. And so
you would want to stop eating.
You would want to stop eating, right? And even if treated, right, I think that we're just coming to understand how infants experience pain and all that learning. So what I tried to do with this treatment was to say, okay, these kids they're scared of their bodies, right? They're scared of sensations. They're scared of what their mouth is doing. They're scared of what their stomach is doing. And so can we make it playful and can we make it fun so that when they have a new taste, when they have a new gut sensation, instead of being scared of it, they're curious about it and they recognize it as a clue to a mystery. So I teach them to be FBI agents.
Okay.
Feeling and body investigators.
Oh, feeling body investigators. That's very cool.
Yeah, it's very fun. And so, even with the children who are severe selective eating, we don't start off with food. We start off with all the, with digest. We have Victor vomit. We have Gaggy Greg. We start off with we learn about Betty Butterfly. We learn about all the different things that happen in your gut. As a way to kind of make that whatever they eat, they can kind of contextualize it. And for some of these kids, we also learn about what hunger and fullness feels like because so many of these kids, because they've been not eating regularly, they've kind of lost contact with those things feel like. And then we introduce the food. And what's been interesting is that for several of these kids, I haven't even needed to address by the time we're kind of ready to do all the sensory features of food, different textures, Slimy Sue and all those kinds of characters, they've already started. eating new foods, because I think we've eliminated some of the uncertainty about what these foods are going to do with me to make it playful.
I kind of can relate to a child who is concerned about Slimy Sue. I'll never forget when my parents took me to their closest friends, and they were serving pizza.
Which was not a staple in Joe's.
I had never
household.
tasted pizza
Is that right?
before. So this was homemade pizza. And it was slimy. There was tomato sauce on top and then melted cheese. And I had never tasted stuff like that before. And I could barely get down that first piece. And then the host said, "Would you like another piece?" Big smile. And I was like, okay. And, halfway through the second piece, I just lost it. I had to make a mad dash for the bathroom, and I lost the pizza. What kid doesn't love pizza these days? Because they've been introduced to it. Their friends love it. Everybody loves pizza. But because for me it was Slimy Sue, I was like, "What?"
It's it's pretty visceral. I'm very proud of you for going for the second piece, though. That was
I was a
pretty
pleaser.
brave.
Really compliant kid.
I tried to
that's-
be a good kid,
Yeah.
and I wanted to make her happy, but
But it is true, like that slime. Like if you feel like that kind of caught in your throat kind of slime, where because then you start to panic a bit.
Oh, I
right?
did.
Right,
Absolutely.
that you're not going to be able, that you're going to choke on this, that you're going to not swallow it.
But here's the question for parents, because there are some parents who believe you're not leaving the table until you eat the tongue, the spinach, the peas, the carrots, whatever it is. You will sit there and you will eat that food. And some children are pretty willful.
Some kids sit there a long time.
Unlike me, I was like, I'll try. Oh, this is terrible. Blah. And half an hour later, I'm still working on that slimy spinach or whatever.
Heading to the bathroom.
And so the question is, how do you, as a clinician, deal with parents who have maybe grown up with the idea that you will clean your plate?
A lot of education, right? I think, because I think that what the misconception is that these children are being willful and trying to exert control, and when in fact they're actually having an aversive sensory reaction to these foods, because of the way that their taste is wired. And so to make, the first thing that we often target is to make to get meal times back so that they're not conflictual and so that everyone's sharing and pleasant. And that we absolutely want these kids to be trying new foods, but whether it needs to happen at a time other than mealtime, just because there's been such a history of this kind of sitting at the table and the child has a tough time even not wanting to come to dinner because it's so aversive. So a lot of it's educating parents that this child struggles with this. This is a challenge, just like other kids in the family might be struggling with, performance on a test, that this is this child's challenge. And, can we all pick something that we're working on and then pick the optimal setting for your child to work on it, which is not destroying dinner time with this power struggle.
Dr. Nancy Zucker, thank you so much for talking with us on the People's Pharmacy today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
You've been listening to Dr. Nancy Zucker, Associate Professor in Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and Associate Director of Graduate Studies at Duke University. She's a child and family clinical psychologist and an eating disorder specialist.
We spoke earlier with Dr. Mark Hyman. He's the director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, president of clinical affairs on the board of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and founder and director of the Ultra Wellness Center. His most recent book is Food, What the Heck Should I Cook? It's a cookbook.
Lynn Siegel produced today's show. Al Wodarski engineered. Dave Graydon edits our interviews.
The People's Pharmacy is produced at the studios of North Carolina Public Radio, WUNC.
The People's Pharmacy theme music is by B.J. Liederman.
The People's Pharmacy is brought to you in part by Verizana, an analytical laboratory providing home health tests for hormones, gut health, and the microbiome. Online at Verizana, Verizana.com. CocoVia.com.
And by CocoVia, the maker of high-potency cocoflavanol supplements that support cognitive and cardiovascular health. More information at CocoVia.com.
If you would like to purchase a CD of today's show or any other People's Pharmacy episode, you can call 800-732-2334. Today's show is number 1189. That number again, 800-732-2334. Or you can find it online at peoplespharmacy.com.
When you visit our website, you can also share your thoughts about today's show. Have you ever had to cook for a picky eater? How did you solve that problem? Do you have a favorite recipe your family loves? Please share your experience. Add your comments at the end of the post about show number 1189.
At peoplespharmacy.com, you can sign up for our free online newsletter or subscribe to the free podcast of the show.
You'll never miss another episode again, and you can share it with a friend. In Durham, North Carolina, I'm Joe Graydon.
And I'm Terry Graydon. Thanks for listening. Please join us again next week. Thank you for listening to the People's Pharmacy Podcast. It's an honor and a pleasure to bring you our award-winning program week in and week out. But producing and distributing this show as a free podcast takes time and costs money.
If you like what we do and you'd like to help us continue to produce high-quality, independent healthcare journalism, please consider chipping in.
All you have to do is go to peoplespharmacy.com/donate.
Whether it's just one time or a monthly donation, you can be part of the team that makes this show possible. Thank you for your continued loyalty and support. We couldn't make our show without you.